Okay, so here's a little thing about knitting in the round. So you've cast on a bunch of stitches onto your circular needle. The first thing you want to do is make sure that all of your stitches are going the same way. So you gotta kind of like unwind all of these bumpy little bumps and make sure they're going the same way, because you'll get a Mobius strip if you don't do that. So there we go. So we're going the same way. So now to join, what I like to do is literally swap the first stitch that you cast on and the last stitch that you cast on. So you put your right hand needle under this first stitch and just slip it over, tighten up a little bit, and then make sure you have the yarn in the back like you're getting ready to knit, and then you slip this stitch over that needle that you put on the other stitch, and now you can see they're crossed or joined, right? You can tighten that up a little bit, and then you just start knitting. And it's a little wonky because, you know, it's a little tight there, but you just put the needle in and just start knitting. Although actually, one of the things you want to do is get your stitch marker so you know what's the beginning of the round, because once you start knitting, it'll just disappear. It'll just look like one big circle. You're like, wait, where did I start? So put a stitch marker on that first stitch, which makes it even wonkier. But you can get in there. You can do it. And then just start knitting. And oops, well, don't do that. But anyway, so you just knit in a circle. Then the other knitting in the round is with double pointed needles. And just like we did with the circular needle, you want to make sure all of your stitches are going in the same direction. And this one's a little easier to see. It's not so bulky, but you can see all the little bumps are all facing the same direction. So, and again, to join, what I do is slip the first stitch off of that needle and just swap it. Hold on, so the stitch there, swap it with the other stitch on the other needle. Now, the thing about double pointed needles is once you start knitting, you already know where the beginning of the round is because it's at the end of this needle. This needle acts as like the end of the round. So once you start knitting, you can just see it. You don't, I mean, you can put a stitch marker in there so that you know which needle. Like if you put this down, you'd be like, wait, which needle did I start with? But also the tail is right here. So that's another indication of where the round begins. So you're not like completely dependent on stitch markers when you're knitting with double pointed needles, which is one reason why I kind of like knitting with double pointed needles. And then you just go around and around and around and around, and that's how you knit in the round. Another thing that I'll show you here, this is my little sock kit. So there's different stages of knitting a sock. I got a bunch of crap on here. So when you get to like the heel, this is what it looks like when you're knitting a sock. Is your, ooh, that needle fell out. Anyway, so you started up here, you did some ribbing, you cast on here, did a little bit of ribbing, then just knit, 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 knit. And it's just gonna look like that. That's the circle part of the circular needle. And then you get to here where you divide the stitches in half. So these are, so here's half of the stitches on two needles over here and the other half on these two needles where you make the heel flap, and you're just going to knit back and forth and you're doing decreases at a certain point. You just kind of decrease here, decrease, 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 till you get to this little point, this little round bumpy thing, and that's going to be your heel. So then when you finished all of that, you have to pick up the stitches along the edge, because you just knit a heel flap back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, slipping the first stitch on every row, and you get those nice little V's. Remember we talked about the little V's? And then, so you'll get this little flap, you take this needle, and you pick up all the stitches along the edge to rejoin where you left off there, and it ends up looking like this. So here's your little heel. I don't know if you can see. There's the pointy part of the heel, and it's like a little cup where your heel sits. You've picked up all the stitches and knit all the way around, and now you can just start knitting back in your tube again down to the toe. So that's, you know, a quick and dirty. I'll do a more detailed sock analysis later, but just to show you what it's like to, you know, what are the advantages of knitting in the round. With, you know, double pointed needles, you can make socks. You can knit something very small, like a cuff of a sweater, socks, some very small hats for kids. When you're using circular needles, you do more, you know, the body of a sweater, something really big, or you can knit back and forth and make a blanket or something like that. But the key is you're joining, you know, you're joining that stuff and knitting in the round. And there's a million different ways to do joints. If you don't like the way that I did that, you can just literally start knitting. It's a little wonky if you just start knitting, because once you start knitting in the round, it'll just like make this long, you know, it elongates the stitch, so you have to be really careful about that. Some people do, there's so many different ways to do it, but that's the easiest way that I know that'll keep it secure when you start knitting. So there's that.